Hey crafty people, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd, because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. Over the years I've dabbled in most types of crafting, although for the past decade or so I've been doing primarily card making and mixed media art. I've recently embarked on a junk journaling journey that I hope you'll join me on. Today I'm going to make cards inspired by one of the gazillion pins of cards I've pinned over the years. And we're going to make them using embossed alcohol ink strips. Let's get crafting. So as I said in the intro, I'm making some clean and simple cards today inspired by one of the items I pinned, and hopefully somewhere up here there will be a photo of the inspiration piece. Now, and I will link the blog post below with the inspiration piece in it, and the blog post doesn't have any details on how she created the backgrounds she used. It did mention an earlier post and acrylic paints. I want to play with my alcohol inks, so that's how I'm going to be creating the colored strips. So I've got out a selection of my alcohol inks. So I am using photo paper for my alcohol ink blending. You can use Yupo, you can use glossy cardstock, you can use acetate, whatever you like to use your alcohol inks on. Use that. I'm using the photo paper because I got a whole bunch of 4x6 photo paper free with a printer. So I figured I might as well use it in my crafting. And I'm going to be working on my glass mat because they're really easy to clean up the alcohol inks off of after you are done. A variety of craft mats that you might have tend to stain with the alcohol inks, so that's something to keep in mind, because alcohol inks really like non-porous surfaces, but you can wipe them up off of a glass mat using rubbing alcohol after you're done. I have got a little needle nose bottle and a mister full of 91% isopropyl alcohol, commonly known as rubbing alcohol. Now, one word of caution, you do not want to put the alcohol blending solution that they make to go with the alcohol inks in a mister, because it contains resin, and resin will stick to everything. And by everything, I mean not just your work surface and the project you're working on, but inside your lungs and in your eyes. And so it is not something you should use in a mister. The isopropyl alcohol won't be a problem in the mister because it does not have resin in it. Now I'm going to use my blending tool, and I know they sell little felt squares for blending on your for your alcohol inks, but you can also make your own by cutting up some felt. And hopefully my dog's barking at squirrels is not coming through on the audio here. And in fact, I need to go cut some more out of felt. So yeah, it's a lot less expensive to cut your own out of felt. I am going to start by inking some backgrounds. And I've pulled a variety of colors, and we're just going to play around. Some of them are relatively new to me. So we're just going to grab alcohol inks and start playing. So I've got turquoise. I'm gonna put a little on felt dauber and just add a little turquoise in, and I think this is gonna be shades of blue and some like gray brown. Ooh. And that one is Lagoon. So just grab whatever colors you have and are your favorites. That needs a little bit of diluting. Grab, this is Patina. Cloudy blue. Some pool. And then add a little slate. And I've got some mushroom. Now you will get slightly different results using photo paper versus using like a glossy cardstock. It tends to absorb it a little bit more than a glossy cardstock does, but not as much as regular like cardstock. Now I'm gonna try, let's see what happens when we mist. I think this is not working as well as I remembered it working. So I think I may grab some glossy cardstock and pull that out and try doing another one using the glossy cardstock. Okay, let's try this again. We're just gonna add a bunch of inks on. Woo, that Lagoon is a little overzealous there. It's pretty much just pounce your colors around. Now let's see what happens when we spray. There we go. We're gonna set that sucker aside and do another one. And actually, before I do that, I'm gonna do a little bit of cleanup because I'm gonna switch colors. See, and it just wipes up with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. All nice and clean again. I've got its nasal aspirator, you know, you use with babies. We're just gonna perhaps not do that quite so violently because I have sprayed alcohol ink all over my table over here that is not glass mat. Oh, I got it on some pieces of stuff that's, yeah, it went everywhere. Oh, you know what? It is coming up off my silicone mat pretty good. So that's good to know. Definitely think I need my splatter box up if I'm going to keep doing what I'm currently doing with this. Probably should tell you what colors I am playing with. I've grabbed Boysenberry, Amethyst, Cobalt, and Glacier. All right, we're gonna set that aside to try. Now, these are not the most beautiful things yet, but we are not done with them. Now for this one, I think I want to add a little copper mixative. Now, the mixatives have to be shaken. And I'm trying to get the ball to move because there's a ball inside here. Back and add a little bit more of the mushroom. So I went ahead and embossed all of the pieces for our cards, and I will list the embossing folders I used below. These three are Tim Holtz Sizzix embossing folders. This one's a Darice, and I can't remember if these two are, if this one is a Sizzix or a Cobalt. List them below. And I did off screen do red and green for a Christmas card as part of my attempts to actually get Christmas cards done in advance this year. So for the Christmas ones, instead of using the nasal aspirator to move the alcohol ink around, I actually used a straw that is part of my craft supplies, and I just blew air through the straw to get the ink to move. And I found that worked a lot better than the nasal aspirator. This was actually the first time I've used the nasal aspirator with my alcohol inks. I have in the past traditionally just done the dauber for pouncing it on and use the straw to move it around. And I picked up the nasal aspirator as an attempt to get around spending $11 for the Tim Holtz lake blower, because there is a tool he has, but that is like $11-12, where the nasal aspirator was $3. But I think the Tim Holtz tool probably works a lot better because it's really hard to move the ink with the nasal aspirator, because you're doing, like, you've got to squeeze it like this and you don't have much control, and it comes out, as you saw, and sprays things everywhere. I would not necessarily recommend going this route if this is something you want to start doing often. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you are embossing, you want to make sure the raised portion is on the side with the color, not the debossed portion. So you want to make sure you're embossing it so that the raised part is where our color is, because we are going to add some metallic paint to it to bring out the embossed bits. So I have grabbed distress paint in brushed pewter, tarnished brass, and antique bronze. All right, I'm gonna go with the tarnished brass because it's kind of a gold color. Now with the distress paints, for the metallic ones, you can hear possibly there's a little ball in it to shake it up and get the pigment mixed. And I'm just actually gonna put a little bit on my work surface, and that's a little more than I probably wanted, and use my finger. You of course can use a brush, but I figure my finger will give me more control over where the ink goes, because I just want to highlight the raised bits that we've got going on from embossing. So I'm just going to go around and just put a little bit of ink everywhere we've got a Christmas tree ornament, and that's making them pop. And you just need a very small amount. So if you're using a paintbrush, you definitely want to go very dry brush, because the less paint you have on, the less likely you're going to get it in spots you don't necessarily want it. And just be careful not to stick your finger in the wet spots, or you're going to end up smearing paint everywhere. Just used a paintbrush to clean up all the extra paint that I did not use, since I sprayed way too much of the gold, and I'm just going to use a little water on my fingers to clean up. Now for these two pieces, I am going to use the antique bronze, and I'm going to do basically the same process over again, although this time I'm going to put a little less paint out, since I did not need nearly as much as I did of the gold. And just again going over the raised bits, I'm not too worried that it's not perfect. This is one of those things you're gonna have to sit there with a fine detailed brush if you want to ensure you don't get anywhere but on the image. This one I did not get as good of an embossed impression. Like I did not run it. I should have run it through a couple times. And so I don't know how well this is gonna work, because there's not enough difference between the raised bits and the not raised bits. But we're just gonna smear some paint around and see what we get. This is another one I should have embossed. Run through my machine a couple times to get a better impression. Okay, so hopefully you can see the lovely gold sparkle we've got on these. This worked out really well. This one came out really well. These two definitely needed to be embossed better, but I've got an idea of what we're gonna do to make this pop a little bit more. And this one was embossed perfectly. The problem is I think there's too much open space on this one, so it made it kind of hard to just get the paint on the raised spots, but I still like it. So for these two, what I'm going to do, help make the embossed bits stand out, is grab some distress crayons. So I'm gonna do Vintage Photo on this one and Hickory Smoke on that one. And what we're gonna do is pretty much just smush it around everywhere. I know this probably looks like I'm just making a even bigger mess of this, but trust the process. Stay with me. Just adding a little water to my fingers to get this moving a little bit better. Because as with most of the distress products, the distress crayons are very water reactive. So so the idea is I'm gonna get the crayon hopefully into the crevices to make the raised bits pop out more. So I'm gonna do that, and then what I'm gonna do is lift it up in spots. In theory. Yeah, this is definitely one, it would have worked a lot better if I had double embossed this, like got the embossed to work a little bit better. This is a new embossing folder, and yeah, I did not have the sandwich correct for embossing it so that it went through and got all of the detail. It definitely you can tell looking at the back, it's hardly embossed. And this is supposed to be one of those like multi-level embossing folders. So yeah, I definitely need to play around with the folder a little bit more. So that worked okay. I think the real problem is, and we're kind of stuck with it, is that this is not embossed enough. I'm hoping it'll work a little bit better on this one, because I think this one embossed a little bit better than the other one. For this one, I'm trying to focus more on getting the crayon in the recessed areas so that hopefully it will help the image pop a little bit more. I think this one I tried to re-emboss and may have shifted it, so it's all kinds of a mess. I'm just going with a damp finger and kind of hitting the highlights on this piece to wipe away the crayon. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. All right, I'm gonna get myself cleaned up, and I'm probably going to cut all of these into strips for going on the card fronts, and we'll come back and assess what we're gonna do with our less than successful ones. And all right, so off camera I went ahead and cut out card bases, which is just plain white cardstock, and I cut it down so that the cards are 5.5 by 4 1/4. So basically you just take an 11 by 8.5 sheet of paper and cut that in half and then fold it in half. For these two embossed pieces, I cut the strips down to 1 inch wide by 3.5 inches long. And then I took some metallic cardstock from my stash and cut backing strips for all of the pieces, and these I did with silver. So I didn't want a ton of the silver backing showing, so I cut them just 1/8 of an inch bigger all around. So that's 1 1/8, say that 5 times fast, by 3 5/8 long for these. And that, when I cut the strips out of these pieces, so it left me with squares that are 2.5 by 3.5, and then I cut the silver paper at 2 7/8 by 3 7/8 and attached those. And then I used my Crocodile corner chompers to chomp the corners. This one is the Deco on the Deco and Stump Punch, or Stub Punch. That's this one. It's the green handly one if you go on Amazon. And then this one is the Cloud, which is from the Scallop and Cloud Punch corner chomper, and it's pink handles. And then I die cut also from the same silver paper butterflies, and these butterflies are Sizzix Tim Holtz Thinlits, and here's the number. It's 661802, and they are called Detailed Butterflies Mini. For the small strip pieces, I've also cut out butterflies, and those are these little guys, and they are a butterfly die by Cheery Lynn Designs that is no longer available, but I'll leave the information. You might be able to find it on eBay. Then for the red and green ones, I cut them down a little bit smaller. So those are 3.5 by 7/8 inch wide for both of those. And I figured we could mix things up and have 2 greens and a red and 2 reds and a green on this. And so the gold mat will be 3 5/8 long by 1 inch wide. And then because the orientation of the clock embossing folder was this way, I decided to go this way with the card. So these strips are 4 3/4 by 1 inch wide, which means the mats, which I went with a copper metallic, is 4 7/8 by 1 1/8 wide. So now we're just going to assemble. Oh, and for these, I die cut some gears from Sizzix Gearhead. I will leave the information below. It's one of my older die sets, so I don't still have the packaging to show you for that one. So I cut out some gears in copper to add as some embellishments on this one. So now we're just gonna assemble our cards. And I'm gonna use art glitter glue for the assembly. And I'm gonna offset the pieces a little bit to add a little bit more interest. Now for the 2 Christmas ones, I want to stamp Merry Christmas at the bottom before I glue on my pieces, because if I mess up in my stamping, I can then just cover up with another piece of white cardstock. And I pulled out of my stash a Merry Christmas stamp that I've had forever. I actually cut it apart so I could stack the words if I wanted to. And it's by Stampendous, and I'm pretty sure it's been discontinued for a while now because this stamp is probably 15 years old. And I think what I'm going to do is stamp with gold ink and just stamp Merry Christmas on the bottom of both the cards. And I am using Brilliance Galaxy Gold. They do the Versamark, Versafine, Versaclair, same brand. This is just their metallic ink. So we're gonna ink this sucker up. Try and stamp it as neatly as possible. And you can barely see it. I think this ink pad may be dead. All right, so we're definitely gonna need to cut a piece of cardstock to cover that up. And I actually have the dewdrop of Galaxy Gold. And I tested it out and it's inking much better than the big ink pad. So we're just gonna go ahead and try this again. Okay, that's much better. So I need to, you know what, actually, I have a spare card base because I made 7 cards. When you're cutting pieces of paper in half, you end up with an even number of card bases. So let's just go ahead and do this guy. And I'll save that other card base for scraps and doing other things with. There we go. And now we just need to attach all of our strips. And I have them all laid out nicely and then just jumbled them together. Okay. That's how those go. That's how these go. So if I do that guy, and that guy. So that's how I did it to make sure the pattern continued as embossed. And this is a, well, I guess we're just gonna squeak in. I was not paying attention when I stamped that. Although I could. I was supposed to, and I picked this stamp because it's a small stamp as far to the bottom as possible so that it would fit on, and I did not. And we're gonna do this again. And we're not going to mix our pieces up again. We're gonna just leave them up here. All right. Third time's the charm. So I'm gonna stamp this as close to the bottom as I can get because I need all the space for the strips. And I will just cover the Merry Christmas on the back with a label that says handmade by. Go. And now it fits. Okay. Okay, so there are all of our cards. So we've got those two, these two Christmas cards, and our little steampunky one. Now, so we made 6 backgrounds, and we made 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see if I can get everybody on screen. 5, 6, 7 cards. We have 1 background left, and I have an idea for what I want to do with this background, so that's why I didn't cut it into strips. So that will be a later video. And a bunch of scraps that I'm going to toss in to like my collage fodder bin to use on who knows what, but I've got some scraps that I can use on other projects. Now, and these types of cards are great cards to have in your stash, you know, setting aside the Christmas cards, which are clearly designed for Christmas, because they're clean, they are simple. You can add a sentiment. If you've got a sentiment that goes up and down along the side here, you can turn these into birthday cards, thinking of you cards, just a random note card, a sympathy card. So if you've got some of these in your stash, when you desperately need a card and don't have time to make one, you can just pull one of these out, add a sentiment, or not, just write a note inside because they're blank inside. You can add your sentiment inside. So they're a great way to have something on hand when you need a card last minute. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting!